You're listening to Our Children, Our Future. I'm your host, Drake Pearson. And today we are talking about the importance of families. What is happening to families here in America? I just looked at the stats, and 23% of children in the US grow up in a single parent household. Now, that is three times more than the global average. The global average is 7%. And here in America, it is 23% of children grow up in a single parent household. Let me tell you some things that happen when you grow up in a single parent household. So this is, what are the effects of single parenting on a child? If I just scroll down here to developmental, many developmental problems of children of single parents revolve around their progress in school. They tend to get lower grades. Their dropout rate is higher than their counterparts from two-parent families. Single parents are more likely to work more hours to make ends meet. They often don't have enough time to assist the child with their schoolwork. Let's just talk about this for just a second. Single parents are more likely to work more hours to make ends meet. Well, today, everybody's more likely to work more hours to make ends meet because the cost of everything has gone up, up, and up, and the amount that people get paid from their jobs has not risen as fast. They often don't have enough time to assist their child at schoolwork. So this means if a parent is struggling to survive, they're a single parent, first off, they need to go to work. So they can't be there all the time with their child. So they do have to send their child to somewhere else to be taken care of while they work. But then they also get less time to spend with their child. This is a crazy predicament, a crazy situation that parents find themselves in where they are working to raise their child, but then they spend less time with their child. They often don't have enough time to assist the child with their schoolwork. Forget about schoolwork. What about just being there for your child to assist them with growing up in this world, with their emotional learning? All this is super important that is kind of being overlooked here. When there are two parents in the home, they can pool resources and are less likely to struggle with insufficient income. Yeah, single parent families are more likely to experience financial problems because they only have one earner. So this is making kind of the assumption that uh, you need to have, if you're going to have both parents in the home, both of them should be earners, which is really interesting. But I'm not saying that a parent can spend more time with their child because one parent is out earning while the other parent it gets to be home. But that is, again, kind of a sign of the times of how economic hardship is hitting majority of families. Single parent children can feel frightened, stressed, and frustrated by the difference between their lives and their friends. Definitely. I would say, speaking from my own experience, I could see my friends who had both of their parents, and I just felt like, well, why isn't my dad here? Does he not like me? Uh, am I not important enough? Am I less than these other people because I don't have that? Psychological effects. Children of single parents are more prone to various psychiatric illnesses, alcohol abuse, suicide attempts than children from homes with two parents. Look at that. Man, okay, I'm bringing all this up because literally just last month was the first National Single Parent Day, where we're recognizing single parents. And it seems like this is only happening in countries like ours. In the US, the rate of single parents is 23%. In Canada, it's 15%. But everywhere else in the world, I believe in China, it's like about 5%. In other countries, it's as low as 4%. The average is 7% everywhere else throughout the world outside of the US. And that should say something. That means that there's a cultural thing going on here where people don't value parents staying together for the long haul as much as they do in other countries. It leads to these sorts of problems: psychiatric illness, alcohol abuse, suicide attempts, at a higher rate than if they had both their parents there. It's not uncommon for children to be exposed or even drawn to the conflicts between the parents during and even after the divorce, which may leave children feeling lonely, abandoned, and even guilty. this has a significant effect on the child. Growing up in a single parent household has a significant effect on the child because, well, not only are they prone to all these things here, but the child themselves feels less than. They feel inadequate. They feel lonely or abandoned or guilty. They don't feel whole. And if we have a society where at least 20% of children are growing up in that kind of environment, that's going to create conditions where it's going to be much harder for these children to get into relationships. It's going to be much harder for these children to be everything that they can be because they feel this lack from their childhood, right? Single parents are more likely to experience disruptions such as moves and remarriage, so less stability in the home. Major changes can affect the children. Kids do well in a controlled environment. Any emotional turmoil and uncertainty may lead to increased psychological problems. And then it says there are positive effects of single parenting. Let's see what those are. While hearing about the adverse effects of single parenting can be overwhelming, there are several positive effects. Okay, stronger bonds with one parent, though. Okay, so that one parent develops a strong, unique bond with their child, as opposed to two-parent home setting. I don't see how that's a positive. Experience interaction with an authentic community. Often grow up with a community of supporters, extended family, friends. Well, why can't that be the case alongside the two-parent household? What's the problem there? This is almost saying like as if this can't happen if both parents are involved, which I don't see why that couldn't happen. Share responsibilities. Children from single-parent family are much more likely to be accustomed to handling responsibilities and contributing to family operations. But just earlier, it was saying how these children have to work to help pay expenses. Are these the kind of responsibilities that we're talking about sharing? It seems like there's more pressure on the child to adopt responsibilities earlier on than they may have, or that they wouldn't have to necessarily, that shouldn't be their responsibilities if both parents are involved. And if they should be their responsibilities, then why can't, they do that in a home where both parents are involved? These are I don't see these as necessarily positive effects of single parenting. The children also learn how to deal with disappointments and turbulent emotions. Yeah, but you can deal with disappointments, and why is dealing with turbulent emotions seen as a positive? You can deal with disappointments even if you have both of your parents. You're still going to have disappointments. But we just saw earlier that not having that stability, not having actually, they're getting drawn into conflicts is what we saw earlier here. They're drawn into conflicts between their parents. And that causes these feelings here, lonely, abandoned, and guilt, right? So how are these seen as positives? Maturity, yeah, a child should develop maturity eventually, but it shouldn't be foisted on them because of the circumstances of their life, being that their parents can't work it out together. Today, many young people, millennials and younger, feel like it's easier. This is according to surveys that are out now. They feel like it's easier to have a child than to be married, which is a problem because in order to have a child, there needs to be a commitment between both parties that they're going to raise that child in the best conditions, meaning both parties, if they're combining their incomes, that's going to be better for the child. If they're living in the same household, that's going to be better for the child because there's going to be more stability. If they can work out their differences and show, hey, whenever we have a disagreement, we can come together and work it out, that's going to be better for the child as well, because they're going to see, oh, this is how you work through conflict, versus whenever there's a conflict, I just throw my hands up and give up. And these are really significant things. All of this is important because it's creating the conditions for our society to be one where people are less stable in their lives. They have less emotional stability, less financial stability, less stability in general. which creates anxiety, which then creates a condition where it's easy for that person to be sold into something that they don't necessarily agree with, whether that be in politics or specifically with their own finances. They're getting sold things that they don't really need, ideas that they don't really need. In fact, today, there are people who advocate for the dissolution of marriage, basically to remove marriages from out of the ideas of people's heads, to remove the idea of marriage. And I'm not saying like, marriage is like, having this paper and all that is all that significant. But what is significant is both parents having commitment to each other and staying together and raising their children in the best possible circumstances, which would be, first off, those parents, when they get together, being on the same page. Because if they're not on the same page, they shouldn't bring a child into the world. And if they're going to bring the child into the world, then they should be living in the same household. They should work out whatever differences that they have. If there's already going to be conflict there, where there's the possibility, and not just possibility, but it's on the table of, if I don't like you later, I'm going to leave, regardless of whether I have a child with you or not. That is not the best conditions for any child. And yet that is the culture that we have today, which says, hey, if I don't like you, regardless of whether I have a child or not, I'm going to leave. And even today, it is a big deal if you say to someone, you should stay together for the children and work out your differences, because then it tells that person, well, what if this other person is just so terrible? Well, if that other person is so terrible, then it would be better to know that beforehand and not have children with them. And also get an idea of what we are doing together financially. All of these are so significant, but I'm bringing all this up because these are things that are not considered beforehand. A lot of times what will happen is a couple will get together. They may live in the same household. They'll have a child together. They are both working. And once the child comes, there's more pressure put on the household, put on the mother specifically, and potentially the mother still has to work. And then these feelings of resentment can come up because a mother is working and she has to take care of the child more so than the father. And then that can create a lot of conflict. And then all of a sudden, it's gotten to the point where the couple can't remain together, or they feel they can't remain together. However, what was not considered at the very outset was, if we're going to have children together, who's going to take the role of working, and who's going to take the role more significantly of being there with the child. And what should be considered there is likely the mother should take the role of being there with the child. Definitely. Why? Because she's more biologically equipped to do so, right? Look at when a child cries in the first year, a mother's oxytocin goes up, which then triggers the letdown for her milk, right? That does not happen in fathers. And so if that's not considered, then that's obviously going to create conflict later on, which then can create the conditions of, I didn't know it was going to be like this, and they're not doing their end of the bargain, whatever the case is. And that is significant grounds for many parents to say, this isn't working out, and they separate, they leave. Another key factor within all of this is many of these couples aren't getting married in the first place. They're not committing to each other in the first place. And maybe they feel like, well, I don't need that piece of paper to tell me that I love you and that we're together. But making that step, that one step of commitment, makes it so that it is more difficult for both parties to just walk away from each other. Instead, now, hey, our finances are tied together. We're seen together legally within the law. And if I do something, if I want to get away from this and go be with somebody else, then there are significant consequences. It's going to take a little bit more for me to just say no. And so it's going to incentivize staying together. That's the idea behind that. That's a big contributor to getting married. It incentivizes working out the difficulties more than being able to just say, I'm done with this. I'm walking out. I'm done. Ideally, what we would do as parents is work out any conflicts that we might have with our the other parent of our child, right? But we're modeling for our child or our children, we're modeling for them how to work through conflict, how to come to agreement, how to work as a team, how to work with the opposite sex. All of these are significant because all these things exist in our world, and a child should learn to be effective within these things so that they can grow into adults who can have meaningful relationships that they don't just give up on, that they don't know how to interact with the opposite sex, that they don't know how to work together as a team, that they don't know how to work with other people effectively, that they don't know how to work through conflict. These are all significant things. These are all things that a child needs to learn. And being able to see their parents work through any sort of disagreements is really good for a child without the parents blowing up on each other and getting into fist fights and all of that, right? Because then it shows, hey, you can have a disagreement and you can de-escalate. You can actually not resort to just getting into a fight or just hurting the other person or escalate all the way to just survival mode, as in, eliminate that thing that disagrees with me, which is a lot of what we're seeing today in our national environment and global environment is whenever there's a conflict, it escalates to the point of shouting and throwing blows and things that it's ridiculous what we see play out in our social media and in our just immediate environment. Whenever somebody has a disagreement, it becomes this thing where people either can't stand each other to the point where they avoid each other, they don't talk, or they can't stand each other to the point where they fight at the moment of opening their mouths. And neither one of those things is supportive for coming to an agreement and having a solution that's going to be effective for everyone, right? And so if we want our children to grow up in a world where they can actually come to real solutions for many of the real major problems that we face in this world, like hunger or what's another one? Poverty. What's another one? Single family homes or lack of education, lack of sanitation. All these things can be solved with the technology that we have today, with the amount of people that we have on this planet today. However, it requires us to come together through conflict, through disagreement, and be able to work together effectively as a team with others that we may not completely agree with just yet. But that has to be modeled in our homes before we can see that modeled in the world, right? And so if you'd like to learn more about how to do that, you can download my free microbook at unlockedfl.com/microbook, where you can learn about the 4 pillars of raising a very effective child. And as always, our children deserve the best, and we can make that happen. So I'll see you guys on the next one.